Yes, let's begin, and if we keep an eye on the
yes, I can let
the admit box, we can let more people in as we go along. So welcome to everybody that's joined us so far. My name is Jonathan Burrows, and I'm a choreographer and also associate professor at the Centre for Dance Research at Coventry University. And I've been co-curating this talk series, of which this is the first one, with Kerry Frankson, who's also a member of faculty at CDARE. Kerry, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, hi all. So I'm a Daphne Jackson Research Fellow here at Centre for Dance Research. And excited to be doing this with Jonathan, and excited for today. Nice to see you all.
Let me now introduce our three guests for today. So Seke Chimutengwende, who on my screen you're at the top. I don't know where you are on anybody else's screen. Lauren Scott and Rosemary Cisneros. And could I start by Seke? Why don't you begin? Since I said you were named first, would you like to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit what your background is, what your relationship to dance and performance is, and what you're involved in now, what your practice or research is at the moment?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Seke. I'm a choreographer and performer and teacher based in London. And I studied dance at Lewisham College and London Contemporary Dance School a while back, 20 something years ago. And I've been working as a performer and a choreographer and a teacher for over 20 years. And the things that I'm working on and with at the moment, I have a solo improvisation practice that's been going for 20 years, which is me on stage or in all kinds of places. Actually, I've performed in people's houses and on the street and sometimes on stages. That's a solo practice. It's just me. There's no score or theme or plan. I almost always work with movement and text. And that's something that's kind of ongoing. And then I also make choreographies, and I'm working on two projects at the moment. One is called The Last Quartet, and that's going to be on in London and Lancaster in the autumn. And that's that has a lot of improvisation in it, but it is a choreography. And I'm also working on a Miles Davis related choreography, which will probably not have loads of improvisation in the final show. So I'm working on those things, and I also perform with a theatre company called Forced Entertainment. So that's sort of mostly what I'm up to at the moment.
Thanks, Seke. I should add that it was a year ago or 2 years ago, Seke and I were teaching together, and Seke proposed that we would work with the idea that it's impossible to combine improvisation and choreography, which I understood as a provocation, but it was a wonderful provocation because it took away the expectation that anybody knew what they were doing. It was when you said, Seke, that the Last Quartet has a lot of improvisation but is also choreographed, then I think that recognizes this fluid boundary where we're often occupying both places. And although today we're going to talk primarily about improvisation, I think it's also perfectly appropriate if the idea of the choreographic or decision making comes into it. Lauren, do you want to go next and tell us a little bit about your background, what you're involved in at the moment, what your practice is,
Yeah,
and what you're
sure.
interested in?
Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren. I'm I'll use the term like movement artist. I specialize in popping and hip hop, so street styles and hip hop related dance forms. I trained at London Contemporary Dance School as well, but I just graduated. So I graduated last year, so I'm fresh out of training. And though I trained at London Contemporary Dance School, I feel like it kind of it broadened my horizons, but I still sit within the realm of popping and street styles, I'd say. I've been working as a freelancer, so I've been performing, teaching, choreographing. I work kind of between like an underground battle space to more traditional theatre spaces. So it's like a cool range in which I can find myself sometimes, or even like I was working with Jonathan on some research with sequential movement and neuroscience over the last 2 days. So it's very cool where my practice has been able to kind of take me so far. Currently, I'm about to enter like a research phase where I'm translating predominantly solo-based movement and solo-based work, whether that's from like solos or just my solo freestyle practice onto into ensemble work, which is really exciting for me. I've been really wanting to work with a cast of other street style specialists and kind of find how my practice or like my choreographic language sits on bigger groups of people. So that's happening over the next year, and I'll be presenting an ensemble work in March of 2027, which is really cool. So that's to come. And then I also have a solo called Adlib, which is something I'm continuing to develop over the next couple of months, which is going to East Asia at the end of the year, which is a 20-minute fully improvised solo. So it was first presented at Resolution, and yeah, I'm going to be working on that and figuring out what worked and what didn't work, and taking it to Asia, which is really exciting. Yeah, I'd say that's about it. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Lauren. And can I highly recommend that anybody watching or listening, maybe after this event, takes a moment to search Lauren Scott on Google and look at some of the extraordinary videos of popping that you've shared on Instagram and YouTube, Lauren. Rosa, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us about your background, what your practice is, what your research is.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Rosa Cisneros. I'm an artist and researcher. I work with Jonathan at Coventry University Center for Dance Research. My background is sometimes I feel like I'm an octopus where I never know, like each part of my day might have slightly different strand or direction, but the core of that is always the body and movement and kind of community. I'm classically trained in ballet and Spanish classical, but I come also from a Roma family. So I have a flamenco tradition that's been given to me by my mother and by the community. And then I went on to train in the conservatoire. So those three worlds kind of sit in my body, and there's often a tension. And so a lot of the research that I done has also explored that. And currently, I have some, let's say, more traditional type research projects that look at chronic pain or education and barriers for certain communities to access different spaces and needs. And I might come into that space reminding people of the body, but also co-producing materials that remember the body or allow people to take that data and explore it through dance. And sometimes that's one of the projects is taking research, and we're creating like these vignettes, and I'm responding to the kind of qualitative and quantitative data with a dance perspective, and we're making films around that and comic books. And but yeah, I continue to dance, I continue to perform. Screen dance has been more of the most recent exploration with dance and technology. So yeah, and that flamenco ballet, kind of the lines and the messiness of all of it kind of is always there. And it's something, even when I'm running or, you know, on the mat stretching, I like it comes up in different ways. Like I'll correct something and think of a line and then say, oh, but wait, the feeling of something else, of flamenco, or, you know, so that's kind of a daily practice in a lot of different ways. So yeah.
Thanks, Rosa. Yeah, that was something that in this 2 days of research Lauren and I have just done with the neuroscientist Katya Konasheva. We spent quite some time looking at and discussing the ways that bodily knowledge returns at unexpected moments, and even Funmi Adewale was observing that it sometimes blocked her from going in another direction because there was an insistence upon a certain embodied patterning that always took her to a certain place. Funmi was saying that when she danced for the Chumleys with Lee Anderson, she took part in a can-can lineup and noticed that her leg always kicked later than anybody else. And eventually she figured out that it was because she came from forms of West Coast African dance. She always bent her knees before she lifted her leg. And therefore, in order to kick her leg at the same time as the rest of the can-can lineup, she had to add a knee bend at a faster speed to occur just before her leg went up, and that was the only way she managed to solve it. And I found this story very recognizable to my own experience of moments of being blocked. So anyway, so I'll just say a little bit about this series called DaRE Invites. Has been running for some years. It always deals with the idea of the body, and in relation to another concept or context. And for this year, Kerry and I have been looking at the body and time. So each of the talks, and I think there's roughly one a week, you can find them on the DaRE website, is looking at different aspects of time. And we're beginning today with looking at what happens in the split second before moving in improvisation. Obviously, this is not an easy thing to access, because we know that much of what takes us in one direction or another direction is actually at a reflex or unconscious level. But nevertheless, we're negotiating that consciously. We are thinking ahead, recognizing what we just did. Well, I say we, I'm not the world's greatest improviser, but we in the general sense as dancers, and I do it when I improvise, obviously. And so Kerry and I would like to invite Seke, Lauren and Rosa to help us unpack that a little bit, particularly because they're coming from different forms of improvisation: popping, flamenco, contemporary dance, and theatre. And so we'd like to invite, what questions, observations, practices, philosophies, specific languages you might have around how you navigate that experience of the pressure of the condensed time of this moment before or during moving, when these non-conscious and conscious processes are overwhelming you in a kind of cascade of possibilities, how do you know where to go? How do you know if where you've gone is the right place? How do you readjust that? So I'd like to start it off with a question from me, and maybe you can each address that question. Then I know you've each prepared questions, observations, or maybe you spark off something that somebody else says. So my first question was, maybe start with Lauren. How do you approach this split second before moving? And more importantly, what strategies do you use to navigate the overload of possibilities?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think when I'm speaking about
Lauren's frozen. Seke, so we shift to you and come back to Lauren when she's it's quite paradoxical that somebody's about to speak about. Oh, you're back. You're frozen.
Sorry, was I not speaking?
Yeah, well, amazingly, you were about to tell us about the split second before moving, and then you froze in time, which couldn't have been better.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry,
did any of that come through?
No.
No. Okay, I'll start again. I just want to say that when I'm going to be speaking about this, I'm going to be talking about a battle context. Yeah, that's what I was saying, and I thought it might be useful to kind of like briefly give an overview of like what that might look like for people who aren't familiar with a battle space. So in a battle space, in like a 1 versus 1 situation, let's say it's like a popping battle, so the technique that you'd be using is popping. You'll have judges, you'll have a crowd all around you. You might be in like a club space, or battles can occur in like many types of spaces. But you'll probably have people all the way around, and then you have this kind of smaller space where the two people battling will be. And one person goes, so there's also a DJ where they'll play a track which you may or may not know. I think quite often you can assume that you won't know it. So you have to kind of use your musical interpretation and very quick like listening skills to predict what might come in the music, so you can kind of like align yourself with the music and what you might do. And then one person will go, they'll do a 45-second to a minute round, and then they'll finish, and then the next person will go, and it's the judge's decision to kind of like use hopefully a non-bias comparative judging system to compare person 1 who went first to person 2, and they'll come up with a decision, and then you'll have a winner. So that's kind of like an overview of what that space might look like. And in that space you have music as like an unknown. You have your opponent, what they might do or might not do. You have the judges, their sort of styles and experience, and sometimes you can also take into account the way that they move and almost alter the way you dance to suit what you might know they like. You have the crowd who can influence through hype or response to your movement. And you also have like the time limit. So there's like a lot of layered unpredictable factors that can play into like what type of decisions that I might make. And I think the music is something that will very much dictate what happens in the round. For me at least, responding to the rhythm, the musicality, what I'd like to present within my round, and navigating that, I think for me by staying rooted in the music and where you are in the music also helps you stay very present, because hopefully throughout that 45-second to a minute round you're aligned with the music as it kind of changes and evolves. I'll stop there. Yeah, I'll stop there for now.
Seke, do you want to respond to that question? What strategies do you use to navigate the overload?
Yeah, so I'm when you sort of talk about improvisation, the first thing that I think of is my solo improvisation practice. Although, overall, I probably spend more time improvising in other contexts, but that feels like that's the most improvised thing that I do, and it's the thing that I've been doing kind of consistently over a long time. And maybe I'll do the same and describe sort of roughly what that is, my solo practice. So it's a performance practice. It's not something that is ever happening with me on my own in the space. So even if I'm practicing, I'll be practicing with at least one person watching. And it's just me, and I'm working with movement, I'm working with vocalization, and I'm working with text, and all of those things are improvised. And the sort of limits that I put on it are, I decide what I'm going to wear beforehand, when it's going to happen, and where, and how long. So I always have quite a strict time frame, which could be anything between 5 minutes and an hour. There's no music. And I think one of my teachers, Ruth Sapora, she talks about this process of going from physical sensation to feeling to content. And I definitely experience that process. And content, I mean, for me, that could be movement content, or it could be vocal content or text. But I think the process is going from physical sensation first, and then a sort of feeling or atmosphere comes out, and then that manifests in something, some action. And I feel like when it's not working so well, it's because either when it's not working well, I get stuck in the kind of content bit. So I'm sort of aware of sensations and then feelings, and then then this kind of content happens, and it could be, I think especially when it's text, it can be very distracting, and I sort of stop noticing how I feel and stop noticing sensation. I wouldn't say it always results in like bad performance, because I feel like there's nothing wrong with like thinking about things and having ideas, obviously. But I think in that context of not having prepared something and having no time, if you get too stuck there, then you're sort of getting into a situation where you sort of think, well, this might be better if I actually did rehearse, if I'm getting so interested in the kind of content brain. But it can also be that I get stuck in the kind of sensation as well, and I definitely feel like I've seen other performers who do that quite a lot. And I think it tends to be less enjoyable, when that kind of stuck feel. I think that's what I mean when I say stuck. It's when it's sort of like, oh, it's not really flowing, I'm not enjoying it. And I think my goal in a way is to stay present, and stay present in that process of noticing. And I'd say that kind of overwhelm that you're talking about, Jonathan, I think yeah, there's a feeling, and this can happen in any kind of creative process, not just improvising, where it's like, oh, there's so many things I could be doing right now. Which one should I do? Or I have no idea what to do. I don't feel anything, which is, I think, is the same thing. It's just a different way of kind of talking about the same problem, really, when you sort of, there's so many things or there's nothing is kind of the same. And yeah, I don't think I have a kind of like formula for dealing with that, but I think either kind of speeding up what I'm doing or slowing down quite a bit helps. So if I'm feeling really overwhelmed, sometimes I just need to kind of go through it and kind of churn out loads of stuff, and that normally brings me back to sensation. And slowing down also does that. And I mean slowing down in terms of slowing down the kind of content that's coming out, or speeding up the content. So I think that's what I tend to do. But I would say I don't really have kind of actual formulas that I work with, and I'd say I kind of resist that, actually. I probably could create some, but I feel like I'm not. I feel like if I go too far down that road, it starts to become some other form that I'm working with. But yeah, I think yeah, what I sort of experience as it working is when that kind of play between sensation, feeling, content, that's happening very quickly all the time, and I'm not getting stuck in one place. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Seke. Rosa, what's your perspective on the overload? I mean, not you don't have to speak specifically of flamenco, but that would also be interesting because it's such a different approach to improvisation. But
Yeah, so I will explain that flamenco context, because a lot of what I'm thinking of right now is kind of bringing me back to that practice. And so I guess I'm feeling right now is about around flamenco. So flamenco is, in theory, a structured improvisation. And there are more, if you think flamenco is a tree, and there are different styles, different rhythms, and there are more popular rhythms than other ones. And in a flamenco, let's say triangle, you'll have the guitarist, the singer, guitarist, and then the dancer or dancers. And those three elements come together in a circle, what we would call a circle. Now, that might be in a community context, which is like, when I say community, it might be in the family, at a wedding, a celebration, or just even on the streets, or you might have something on stage that's a bit more organized. But at the core, there's an improvisational lens voice that frames that. Now, earlier when you said, Jonathan, that like improv and choreography and kind of that relationship, and that it's fluid, I think flamenco really straddles that, because you might have a choreographic piece, but there's always going to be an element of a structured improv in there. And that relationship, there is a hierarchy, but there's also a relationship. And the singer, let's say, is the one that sets the tone and tells us how, when, and to follow. We follow them. There's the guitarists and the musicians, and then the dancers. And now we think of flamenco as the dancing first for a lot of different reasons, and I won't get into that right now. But that relationship, though, for me, has always been a tricky one, a beautiful one, a very vulnerable one, and a raw one, because I'm in conversation and dialogue with a lot of different elements, but at the core is the rhythm. So that compás, that rhythm, I know it's a 12 count rhythm. How it's accented and how each of us want to say, if everyone says good morning, we'll all say it differently. So I know that, and I'm prepared for that. So there's something about the way I sit or enter that space that helps me process what you're saying, the tension or the overload. So, and there's certain things, like when I was performing and touring, there were like little rituals that I had. And even a stage manager knew that I was going to feel sick and probably threaten not to go on stage. And, you know, I do this whole thing because of the kind of overwhelm of what I knew was about to happen created such an anxiety that somehow there was a release on stage, and I knew that I would feel held by the rhythm, by the people. And there are moments when it goes totally wrong. And, you know, I remember there was once I couldn't actually hear anything. I don't know if the music was too low and then my footwork, but it just wasn't, there was something about it, and I couldn't hear anything. And I just had to kind of let go. But there's like a constant holding, controlling, and letting go, even in an 8-12 count moment. And there's a lot of beauty in that, but it's also overwhelming. And so sometimes I feel like when I was younger, I felt like it was an out of body experience sometimes. Like I could see myself and what I was about to do, but then knew that whatever I did was going to be okay because I had studied the rhythms, or I knew I had a relationship with the other people in that space. And there are times when, you know, in a community setting, when maybe, you know, I'm tired or I had a little bit too much drink or something, and you fall over, and then that becomes part of it, and you're still held, but in a different way. So that probably sounds terrible not going on camera online. I was drinking too much and I fell over. But, you know, I mean, they're different contexts, but there's a different kind of rawness and vulnerability to it, to that conversation, which is really beautiful. But it speaks back to that bodily knowledge, and kind of also the training. So for me, that training may have been in a studio, but also in the way that I observed, or was told to observe, some of the elders. And I remember once I took someone who didn't know anything about flamenco, but wanted a community, kind of what we would call a huerga experience. And we were in the back, and there were like all these people in a circle, and there was the center of the circle, and people were dancing, and, you know, and she just kept trying to like see what was happening. And everything was about like seeing what was happening. And I said to her, I said, just relax into it, find the rhythm, and the circle will let you in, and you'll get closer to the front. And eventually that's what happened. And she got her front row seat to it. But it's just that it's kind of, even if you're on just doing palmas or clapping, if you settle into it, eventually you enter that conversation too. So yeah.
Lauren and Seke and Rosa, do you have any thoughts or responses or questions to any of those ideas that came up then?
I had a question that came up about your practice, Seke. I feel like my practice and Rosemary's practice are very social based, and yeah, I really like what Rosemary was talking about being held by people, or the music and the rhythm. For you in your solo practice, I guess I was just wondering, like, what do you feel held by? Like, whether it's like during performance or your practice, like, do you feel like you have a sense of being held by something in your work?
Yeah, I was also noticing that as a sort of difference of kind of orientation in a way with the practice. I think I do feel held normally, mostly, by the audience, whoever's watching. I feel like audiences are very generous with watching improvisation, mostly, not always, but mostly. And when I'm practicing, you know, with someone or some people in the studio, there's a sense of, I tend to work with people when I'm practicing that, you know, for many years. So there's a sort of, connection there that does that I think holds me. But yeah, I mean, there are also moments where I feel quite alone or with it. But it is, I think, when it feels really like the best is when I feel like I am part of the audience, as in I'm part of that group, and I'm doing a role within the room of like I'm the person, a bit like if we were all at someone's house and so I'm going to go and make some tea for everyone. It's not a kind of like special, I'm a special person or I'm against this group, or it's like it's a function that's needed in the room at that moment. I mean, it's not exactly that, but I feel like when it feels kind of close to that, then I feel like it's really good, and it's not a kind of division. It's just I'm the person who happens to be fulfilling a function. Yeah. I was wondering from both of you how much the word improvisation comes up in the work that in those specific works that you do.
I think that the word improvisation is usually replaced with freestyle, and I think it's interesting for me as well to notice like in what kind of spaces I'll use the word freestyle and in what kind of spaces I'll use the word improvisation, because I think in a more contemporary context, people relate less to the word freestyle or understand it less, or even though they are in my mind the same thing. So I think, yeah, it doesn't come up as much in sort of like underground spaces for sure. And I think it can be used to almost the term.
You've frozen again, Lauren.
Oh no. Hello. Have I gone again?
No, you're good, Lauren.
I'm back. Okay,
good now.
sorry. Where did I cut off? Or did I cut off the whole time?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think we caught about the underground and using the word differently.
Okay,
Yes.
yes. The term improvisation is definitely used less in underground spaces. I think I find it used a lot more in contemporary professional spaces, even though I see them as the same thing. I think, yeah, I think the word improvisation is easier for some people to understand in like professional spaces in particular than freestyle, even though yeah, they're the same thing to me. Yeah.
It doesn't come up that much in, like, I would say, a performance context. But if I'm teaching flamenco, that's where I think it's useful to explain the relationship and the dynamics, because I also have to acknowledge that I come from a very traditional way of, I guess, entering flamenco, teaching, holding, and I say that, but then I also I think with the screen dance work, I'm really trying to challenge some of those traditions. But oftentimes there's a lot of focus on the dance and the body and the shape of flamenco and the look, and even like the way people hold their faces, they think they have to look angry. And, so I think when I'm talking about flamenco or teaching flamenco, or in that context is where it comes, I've heard it improvise, that word improvisation used, but in a flow in the circle, you would say el compás, the rhythm, so it's yeah, I think that's another element for me that kind of brings up the question of trust. And like, I don't know, Lauren, how if you do teach, or either of you, if you do teach, how you offer your practice to another body, and how, you know, do you bring in that kind of awareness of what you do, or how to make a decision, you know, or follow an interest in that moment? Because yeah, that's something that I've struggled with at different moments, and I've often curious how other practices might do that. So, yeah.
For me, when I'm teaching, or if I'm trying to get students to find like freestyle and improv, I'll typically offer first the technique and the principles. So ideas that they can use as anchors that are rooted within a style, so that then I can then offer exercises or tasks that encourage space for like playing. So I might replicate like a cipher, like which is like a dance circle, where they could have a certain amount of counts where they're using the vocab or the principles that I've taught, and a certain amount of free space, could be counts, to explore using the same shapes, but in their own way, playing with maybe texture, dynamics, musicality, or like yeah, bringing their own sort of like free movement in. I think there's quite a few ways to access freestyle as people who are new to it. I think it can be quite a daunting thing as well sometimes. It depends what space you're in. Throughout my training, I know a lot of people found freestyle or free movement more daunting, whereas I'll teach some kids sometimes, and it doesn't even cross their mind that that's any more difficult than choreography. So I think it also depends on the context, but you can set up structures for people to have more or less freedom within the technique or the principles. That's how I might do it.
Yeah, I was thinking about this before, you know, before we started this, because I feel like a big part of my relationship to improvisation is teaching and seeing students improvise. Like, I feel like I've seen thousands of people improvise in my classes, so that's a big, including Lauren. Yeah, I guess I mean, I think in terms of my solo practice, I don't share that so much in my teaching, actually. A lot of the teaching that I do is to do either, or most of it is to do with ensemble, so people improvising with each other, and then sometimes it's more to do with improvising in a kind of more choreographic context or frame. But I think, yeah, I guess I'm quite keen to set up situations in the studio where I sort of disappear a bit, where they're not kind of thinking, oh, how would Seke do this, or how, you know, what does Seke think right now of what's going on? I mean, I don't know how people feel, but I sort of try and set up a space where people are kind of getting more interested in what they're doing and kind of solving the problems themselves. But I guess, yeah, I'm not really teaching something that has a kind of technique in the sense of a sort of style or kind of code. I mean, yeah, maybe that's probably a whole other discussion about whether, or you know, what style is. But yeah, so I think it's probably a little bit different in that sense in terms of what I do. Yeah.
There's a question from Adriana for Rosa, but just before I come back, I'd like to come back to that just in a moment. I just wanted to pick up on one thing that you were all talking about then. Um, what this may be more specifically for Lauren and Rosa, this question, but Seke, please feel free to respond. What might the link be between the kind of split second in the moment timing of improvisation and the kinds of social contract that you were describing a moment ago, Rosa? You spoke about your friend entering the circle, or earning your place in the cipher, or is this something about the in the moment form of improvisation which invites a specific sociality?
Yeah, I think in a performance context, it would be to, you work together, you have maybe an idea of what you might do, different moments, verses and how long they may or may not be. You might challenge that, or the singer might want it to go, or but I think it's the ultimate kind of surrendering that you're just gonna have to listen and be present. And we all kind of, or at least the people I've worked with, we all kind of have that understanding. And so if it goes great, or if it really goes this way, or if it, we all kind of are open to that, and that surrender, and to also be who you are in that moment. And I think that's a really hard thing, because if you have the pressure of a performance, of stage, of the, there is a lot of moving parts, the light cue, that, like, but there's also and that's a philosophy, I think, from the community context of where flamenco comes from. Like, what will be, you just have it. So it's kind of holding certain values, and bringing those into the space and honoring them. So yeah, and then in a kind of community context, it's a similar thing, but there's also a level of know your place and respect things, and know, I see a lot of young people, just because they have great technique, they think they can go in and go into a circle, or kind of understand a rhythm, or yeah, I know what this singer might, or predict, because so there's also a thing about timing and kind of legacy, and know your place in things, and don't get too don't run before you've kind of can walk, or you know what I mean? Like, there's something in there that there's an arrogance and a humbling experience in there. And I think a lot of flamenco say it's a lifestyle, and they say that for a reason, because that people have dedicated their entire life to this craft, this art form, the practice. So you can't just like roll up and say, hey, I'm gonna, yeah, sorry, I get kind of on my soapbox about that. I'll stop. Mute me now.
Lauren, in the cipher, what's the relationship between staying in the moment and the sociality, the entering the cipher?
I think there's a lot of overlap with what Rosemary was saying about like it's very like dependent on who you're battling, or like who you're in a cipher with, or who you're sharing space with, in terms of like yeah, you might have your mentors in the space, you might have your maybe I'll use the word enemies, but you don't have to have enemies, but people who you don't maybe enjoy their way or their approach of doing things so much, or you would do it differently. And that's also like a difference in values, or training maybe. Also, if you're with friends, there's certainly cipher etiquette as well. So within the cipher, there are like unwritten rules that you kind of have to learn through being in them, unless they're like explicitly taught to you, which are things like depending on what type of cipher you're in, it might be a cipher where it could be like an older generation cipher where you can tell it's people of a certain caliber or experience, and it's their cipher. And as a younger generation, it wouldn't make sense to go into that cipher because it's not for us in that moment. Or you have slightly more battles can also emerge from ciphers, and you can really feel like the tension sometimes, and it is like you have to kind of be in it to be able to feel that, and it's the same with battles. Like if I'm battling a crewmate, the exchange and the decisions I make will be very different to if I'm battling someone in a final where I really want to win, and I've done however many rounds to get to this place, and it's kind of like a game time, like and yeah, or a mentor. If you're battling a mentor, there's a certain amount of respect that you would show in a way, whether that's through going really hard on them and really trying hard to beat them, or having it more of a friendly exchange. And these are all like social situations where they're not written or they're not spoken, they're just felt. So I think that relates quite a bit to Rosemary's comments on that. Yeah.
I'm going to bear that in mind in my next performance in 2 weeks' time, that I might have enemies in the space. It didn't ever occur to me, but of course the possibility is always there. Seke, did you have any responses to in the moment and the particular social contract of being present within the space of an improvisation?
Yeah, I guess I'm really interested in like the very beginning of an improvisation, and I'm often in the audience before I perform, or with the audience. Occasionally I'm backstage or in another space, but I'd say like 90% or more of the performances I've done, I'm somehow in the audience with people. And I feel like that moment from switching from being somebody who's just in the room with everyone to the person performing is really it's really easy to kind of miss what happens, I find personally, in that transition. And I'm in a particular mood, or I feel like there's a mood in the room, and it often changes quite dramatically when I step up to perform. And it often kind of slows me down because I'm expecting one thing and it's actually something else that's now in the space. And I'm trying to be more alert to that, rather than sort of thinking like, oh, this is what the evening is like right now, therefore this is what my performance is going to be like, because that just gets in the way of noticing what's going on. And I think it's really different for me. I've performed in a lot of contexts, maybe not so much these days, but I've performed in a lot of contexts where people don't know that I'm improvising, or they don't know who I am, or they don't know that I'm even going to perform. Occasionally in places where they don't even know there's going to be a performance at all. And that's also, that kind of really amps up this thing. And there's something around care and like taking care of myself, but also sort of taking care of the other people, that I'm not trying to sort of inflict something on the space. It's a conversation and an exchange, not a kind of, set of demands that I'm coming in with into the space. But I feel like it really is to do with this kind of split second timing and noticing what's kind of actually going on in the moment.
Let me come back then to this question from Adriana. Thank you for putting this in the chat. So it says, a question for Rosemary: what influences may El Duende bring to improvisation in flamenco practices?
Oh, okay. So I'll just duende is a concept in flamenco where it's I don't know, it's like a heightened truth or a moment of like, oh, like it just of everything perfectly aligns. And I hear it a lot with flamencos and within the flamenco community, and it's used. And so the way I was taught to have a relationship with duende and this moment or this feeling is that I have to say it in Spanish. El duende no te busca, te encuentra. So it doesn't find you. You don't go looking for it. It finds you. And I think it happens to me in a few times. So I tell a lot of stories because I think that's another way to explain. And that's also a very Roma thing when we're talking about flamenco. But everything aligns. Everyone is kind of in that raw, vulnerable place. And in that, it's like a shared experience where you just know that none of us are thinking, but just allowing those split-second decisions to happen. And you're flowing in a way, and that rawness or that heightened space, you know you've had duende, and that energy, it's like people just know it. And one of the times it happened to me, someone said to me, "You look so old dancing. You look so old." I was younger, much younger, but I understood what they meant. I think what they saw were all of my people, all of my teachers were kind of in there with me. And that's something like my own practice, like going back to the initial question of overwhelm and overload. I've always would thank key people, or depending on what country I was in, I was thankful specifics and name them. And so those people were already in my head, in my body. And when it's happened in that particular moment, it was a really heightened place and space. And so when I realized it was a compliment, they just didn't know how to articulate it. So I think there was something in the face, something in the way I must have been holding myself that brought in a kind of old flamenco way. So yeah, and that's that I was saying earlier, like people wear the flamenco face. They think if they count and if they do this and if they're counting the rhythm with their lips, they somehow look more flamenco, therefore they're performing better flamenco. That, is something that I really struggle with. Even when I go see a show, I'm like, you don't need to tell me you're doing flamenco, I'll feel it. And so it can be a complete non-flamenco dancer, but if they go in and they're just following, they're flamencos for life. So yeah, so I think this question about duende and improv, I think it brings, improv can take you to duende, but you can't use improv to go looking for it. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Adriana.
We can maybe open up the conversation to if anybody else has any questions, and if you just type them into the chat. I've got an eye on the chat here, but while we give people a moment to do that, Lauren and Seke, duende in your performance, do you experience moments of the sense that everything has come together, that there's a sense of truth, a sense of meaning has happened?
I think so. I'm not sure if we have like a term for it, but there's moments where it feels like
You froze again, Lauren. It's always at a very important moment. You're back.
I'm so sorry. I'll start again. I think there's not necessarily a term for it, but I see them as kind of like these magical moments where everything seems to align in the perfect synchronicity, and if someone's dancing, they are perfectly connected to the music and perfectly connected to whatever choice that they decided to make in that moment physically. And it feels like this can also happen in cypher, but it feels like an elevation in the room. And there was a time last year at an event called Just Taboo. It was the UK qualifiers, and my friend and crewmate Rory, who's a great house dancer, I think it was in the finals or the semi-finals, but there was just a perfect connection between the selection of track from the DJ. So it's also like the DJ's choice perfectly aligned with Rory's choices, and the whole room. I think there was an elevation in the music and the way Rory captured that in his movement. The whole room stood up, and it was like I stood up. I wasn't sure what was pulling me up, but every single person stood up in that room in that moment, and it just felt like such an elevation. And it doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, it's really really special. So yeah, that feels kind of similar to me, and that can also happen in a cipher, where it feels like every sort of possibility is just colliding for that perfect moment. And it does feel rare, but when it happens, it's just, yeah, really magic.
Yeah, I think similar. I feel like one of my teachers, Andrew Morris, talks about circular breathing, when sort of what you're sort of taking in and what you're giving out is sort of happening at the same time. You're noticing stuff and you're kind of generating whatever material it might be, and it's kind of happening very, very sort of close together. And I think, yeah, that feels like something similar. And yeah, it's really interesting, this sort of idea of like it finds you, and you're not out there looking for it, or that's not the way to get to it. I think yeah, that feels right to me. And I think, I mean, I guess there's a slightly different feeling where there's some aspect that feels really good, but it's kind of on only sort of one level. And sometimes that feels, I don't know, I've done performances where I'm like, oh, that was great. And then I watch the video and I'm like, yeah, it was fine. But there was something that I was feeling, like maybe it was, you know, a sensation or something that was kind of interesting intellectually or whatever. But it wasn't that thing of kind of everything coming together. So that's sort of an interesting distinction. And also similarly, I've done performances that felt really sort of difficult and kind of tricky, but they've been super interesting to watch. I think, like when I watch the video back and people have sort of commented on that. But I think, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I feel like there's sort of different things that could work or not work, that are and I think this idea of sort of everything kind of coming together is a sort of very specific thing. Yeah.
Do type any questions you have into the chat. Anybody that's watching and has a thought. Oh, we've got one here. This is from Saskia Horton. What do you think, if any, is the role of ancestral practice, i.e. epigenetic coding explored through dance lineages, in the moment before improvisation? Shall I read that again? Fantastic question. What do you think, if any, is the role of ancestral practice, i.e. epigenetic coding, explored through dance lineages, and how that might manifest in the moment before moving in an improvisation?
Can I ask a clarifying question? What is epigenetic coding? Is that like, yeah, sorry, maybe that's
Saskia, do you want
not.
Saskia, do you want to type that in and I'll read it out?
I mean,
I think I know what it is, but I'm not sure.
Well, I wonder,
Saskia,
Jonathan, if Saskia wanted to put her camera on and ask the question herself, or
yes, why not?
reply,
Yes,
that might
at the
be.
moment she's laughing, ha ha ha, because it's hard to explain in a message. Saskia, so if you put your camera on and Kerry knows what to do. Saskia's having difficulty unmiking. But maybe
Oh, I can do it now.
Yeah.
I think there was like a block on it. Hello, can you hear me?
oh, there we go.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, so I just spoke that as an example because so ancestral practice, I think you were starting to talk about it already with the duende idea, but epigenetics is the idea of how we, well, it's kind of complicated, but ancestral, we like inherit sort of lived experience and memories in the body, and sometimes even it alters our genetic code through what our ancestors have experienced in their lives. So we might not, like, for example, we might not like have a memory of our great grandmother doing something whatever, but then like you might feel, as a disabled person, I experience it a lot where I have symptoms and I don't understand where they're coming from, and then I hear a story of someone in my family who went through something and I go, ah, okay. And I've explored a lot through improvisation, how to release certain blockages in that line. But I think why I said epigenetic coding explored through dance lineages is then I think it's really interesting when you bring in dance lineage as well as your personal lineage and like a culture that you commit yourself to, your teacher, like you were saying, Rosemary, your teachers, their teachers, etc., and how to move things through and unblock and but yeah, it's more just the general, however that relates to you, what is the role of ancestral practice, and yeah, the epigenetic thing is just an example of how I do it.
Yeah, thank you. That's really beautiful question. And thanks for that clarification and for making that so kind of accessible for me to understand. And I think flamenco certainly lends itself, or maybe I think is an expression or a kind of living, breathing art form that is responding to or somehow has inherited epigenetic coding in some way. I don't know, that's something to look at, but my hunch is that yes, because flamenco is a living, breathing art form, and it was informed by different Roma traditions and that journey, and that's been passed on through storytelling and body, and but certainly that ancestral lineage is there, it's palpable, and it's in the room in a number of different ways. Now, again, I'm talking about a bit more of a traditional context here. And I was given flamenco in that way, and we have a saying, or I was brought up to think flamenco, you've been dancing for 150 years, because it's not me on stage, it's my mom, my grandmother, that family, that clan mentality, that all of those people are with you. And I've kind of adapted that to say, okay, so my ballet teacher, ballet master, and all of them are now part of this lineage and way of working. But I think there's something else there that is another level of, flamenco was born out of the pain, the suffering, the joy, the travel, the journey of the Roma community, and they absorb that trauma, and that trauma is carried on and lives in the body in a number of different ways. And I think some of that is probably, like, a lot of flamenco dancers dance while they're pregnant, some professionals, some not. I know I certainly did that when I was still really kind of dancing. And there was a moment when I was pregnant and the pregnancy wasn't going well, but we still had to commit to that performance. And I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I absolutely didn't know. And that all of that trauma was in the room, and it was the guitarist that just got me through it. Like, and all of that was in there. So I think that idea of inherited lived experience in the body is, in flamenco lends itself, and in a way I think is an artifact of that. And I don't, you know, obviously it's different in different contexts now, but at its root, I would say it lends itself to thinking about this. Yeah, so I'll stop.
Lauren was
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm really interested in the traditions that are informing a practice, or even a kind of specific performance. I feel like that's something I'm always thinking about, and I feel like, yeah, I mean, there's sort of different things that that question is sort of making me think of, and I feel like there's a sort of very personal thing of like my family, and like my, you know, both of my parents danced a lot, and I feel like, yeah, you know, if I ever meet people who knew my dad, and then I say that I'm a dancer, they're like, ah, yeah, and then they start talking about my dad dancing forever, and don't ask me anything about what I'm doing because they get lost in that memory. So there's yeah, there's something around kind of like yeah, that kind of you know, the people that I'm, you know, literally descended from. And I know that my dad's dad used to perform, and although I never met him, so I feel like that's sort of, that's one thing. And then, yeah, I guess the kind of yeah, performance traditions that my practice comes out of, and I feel, yeah, that feels like a big support to me, that to know that that other people did this before. Not many people, but a few people, and I feel like it gives me a sense of responsibility to keep doing it. I think, not in a kind of heavy way at all, but in a supportive way. I feel like, I need to keep doing this because those other people started it, and so I have to keep going. And yeah, and then, yeah, I don't know, I don't think there's time to get into this now, but I think there's some really complicated things around yeah, the politics of these traditions, and who enacted them, and in what contexts, and in what conditions, and what's, how does that relate to what's happening now, and the people doing them, and yeah, yeah, that's sort of super interesting thing, and yeah, there's not often, I feel like there's not often space to kind of really go into that, but yeah.
Lauren, any thoughts on this?
Yeah. Hi, Saskia. Me and Saskia have we're friends, and we've talked about this before, actually. I think similarly to what Seke said, I think there's like different levels to it. There's like my own ancestry and lineage, and then there's the dance lineage, and that kind of how closely connected I might be through my teachers to the pioneers of the dance, for example. I think what's really interesting for me. I'm a quarter Chinese Malay, but I'm not necessarily. I don't have like a direct connection to that part of my identity, because my dad was adopted. And Saskia, you're also quarter Malay, right? Yes. So we've talked about this before, and I think it's not something that I've gone super deep into, but it's definitely like a point of interest for me in understanding like what dance is, or who is kind of within my like genetic makeup, and what influences there might be that I'm completely unaware of that come into my dance practice, but also like my personality and who I am. I think like I have interest in the sort of learning more about like the cultural dances or traditions that come from these places that I'm connected to learn about and discover more about that part of my identity. But my teacher, one of my teachers who's from the States, he said once he found out that I was mixed and had like kind of this part of my identity, he was like, oh, you've got like party dance within you, like the groove and the social connection to music, and to have that highlighted by him was really interesting, and yeah, to feel like that something is like embedded within me, and it's I'm very interested in like continuing to like unpack that and learn about that within my own dance practice. And yeah, like the sort of ancestry of the dance and the origins in the dance, like lineages, I think for me, as I continue to develop and learn about my dance practice, the importance of understanding the cultural significance and learning about the people behind the moves, the locations, the timelines, is becoming more and more important, not only to inform my practice, but to help me help others when I'm in positions of talking about the style, representing in what sort of way that means, and sharing information with other people. It's something that it is a responsibility, and something like my positionality to these styles is something that I'm it's definitely something that I'm wanting to continue to learn about and understand, as I continue on with like the rest of my career, for example. I had one other thought on this, trying to find, and like feeling like the dance, Rosemary said earlier about how someone thought you were old, not thought you were old, but like they could see the other people within you and the dance, and I feel the same. Like I think it's also starting to shift from learning dance moves to feeling that what my practice is like bigger than me as an individual, and in terms of the people who it represents from the past, and also the future people that might want to learn about or understand, and like what it means to be me and my identity, to practicing a style, and like what that might, how other people might see themselves within me, or it becomes slightly bigger than just dancing at that point. Those are my thoughts on that.
Sorry,
can I just jump in? And I just had one other thought around that, which is I think a lot of the traditions that my practice is connected to or comes out of are sort of really have this idea of a kind of blank canvas, or sort of starting from nothing, ground zero, the empty space, and yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. I feel like there's a lot to question around that framing of improvisation, and that's all I wanted to say. Yeah.
Thank you for adding that, Seke. It's very important that observation is in the room within this conversation about lineage. We had another question from Adriana, who asked about duende, and it's a very good question. Then we had a question came afterwards from Amy Shepherd. Adriana, if it's all right, we're going to hold back on your question and see if we have time to come back to it. But it was a question about whether there's a difference in making split-second decisions alone or with other people, which was a very important question. But if I could come first to Amy's question. Improvisation can often be concerned with production or what comes next. Do you ever sense loss of movement within performance, or maybe loss is something that is revealed after performance? And how do you reconcile the improvisations that had particular impact on you as performers with the knowledge that the same cannot be repeated? How does this inform your practice? Wonderful and wonderfully articulated question. Does that make sense? Would somebody like to speak to that?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I struggled a lot with the idea of feeling like I was on that night. And because everything was working in the improv or what we were doing, like, yeah, you could feel it. So I went in maybe thinking I could replicate, or, you know, back then there were no phones to record everything. I'm not a dinosaur, but, you know, that it was not just technology wasn't to set up and record a show or something. It was a thing. So I remember thinking, oh, I wish so I could see what I do and maybe try and do that again. Or do you remember what I did there? And then I kind of released and let go of that because it created more anxiety for me and it didn't serve me in any way. And now I actually really enjoy the moment of the moment. And so, while maybe I don't see it as a loss anymore. And I love that it can't be repeated. And I think that's the essence of dance in it, not even just flamenco, just the authenticity of that moment. And that's really powerful and beautiful. And I think that's something we're losing. So when I see people on their phones at shows or at things, it's like, no, it won't feel this, just be in this moment with me. So I think that loss is not, or potential loss is actually the gift. So it's a beautiful question. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, similar. I think I've had a similar journey with it of having, you know, having some shows where it's like, oh, I wish that had been filmed, or even worse, it was filmed and somebody or me deleted the footage, or, you know, that kind of. I don't feel that so much now. I did have I've had a couple of times where, yeah, a couple of years ago, I did a couple of shows and I thought, oh, those were really good. Maybe I should just stop, not do any more. So I've had that feeling. That's something that comes to me. And yeah, maybe the sort of flip side of that is that I find it more interesting when I'm performing and practicing a lot. Like it's sort of less interesting when it's very sporadic to me. It's like when it's sort of, this is just happening all the time. This is who I am. This is what I do. I don't sort of care so much about each individual instance of it. And so that's yeah, I think, I guess the other something that where I do feel loss is I feel when other people stop doing this work. That's I think I have that sense of loss. I'm like, oh, there used to be, you know, these practitioners, or, you know, for whatever reason, yeah, they've sort of moved away from it. That's probably the place that I most feel it. Yeah.
For me, I think, yeah, when I'm constantly practicing, or when I have many chances to perform and improvise, I put less pressure on like the outcome. And I think one thing that I'm learning, especially I mentioned in the beginning, I have a solo which is 20 minutes of sort of like, it's the longest sort of, freestyle form solo that I have, with like the least amount of structure. And for me, there's a lot of new information and like thinking about improvisation versus set choreography. And I think I'm also coming to terms with the fact that an improvised performance shouldn't be something that's like repeated in the same way, even if like one goes really well and you're like, oh, maybe I should just fix that now because that might be like the best way of doing it. But like understanding that as well with improvised performances, the nature of them is that they're improvised, and so they're almost like imperfect. I think I'm also learning to like grapple with that, because I think when we set something, or even if it's just like slightly more structured, we create these moments which we know are hopefully going to land every time. And I think with improvised performance when it's very loose, we don't have those anchors. So we kind of have to like swim through it, and it can feel very different, I've found, versus having something that's more set, because you feel a bit, you don't have the armor of set choreography where you know things are going to land, or you've set it up for the audience to feel a certain way. But I think that is the nature of improvisation that I'm learning about at this kind of what feels like at the start of a practice that uses freestyle improvisation for like longer form performances. And I think realizing that loss is also a part of the practice, and like accepting it and realizing it's just a part of the practice. Yeah, that was kind of my thoughts on that.
We're right at the edge of the talk time now, but I don't want to leave Adriana hanging. Would you each maybe have one thought about what's different in terms of split-second decision making when there's somebody else there? Maybe just one thought, if there's an obvious thought for you. What is different in that situation, just before we wrap up?
I think for me, it's really alive in a very different way. It feels like a bigger risk. But yeah, so that's for me the biggest thing. If it's another dancer that I'm improvising with, if it's another musician, that's like an already established norm. But if it's another dancer, it's like, oh, it's like another element that is a risk, but also a really great reward if it goes well. But it's never a competition for me. At least it's never feels like a competition with anyone in the space.
Yeah, I think one thing that's different is that the process is much more transparent to the audience when it's an improvisation with, or in the kind of work that I do with multiple people, and the split-secondness is much more transparent, I think, which can be, when it's good, can be very exciting to watch. So I think that's something. And I guess the other thought I have in relation to that is that often I'm letting a lot more impulses go when I'm improvising with other people than if I'm on my own. So it's quite a different feeling. Yeah.
Sorry.
So go on. Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say, I think when improvising with other people, I overthink a lot less, because I feel more held by them being there, and the outcome being on the both of us rather than me alone in my mind, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yes, I would certainly echo that thought. The feeling of it's not about, it's less about me. Come to the end of the talk now. Thank you, Seke Chimutengwende, Lawrence Scott, Rosemary Cisneros. Beautiful, articulate thinking. There's been many lovely comments in the chat. Thank you for all the people who offered questions in the chat, which were took us in directions which were very fruitful. Thank you, Kerry Frankson, who's my co-curator on this series, and thank you to the CDARE staff who helped set up the talk, and for everybody that joined us today. We'll log out now. Thank you. Bye.